The rain had not stopped for 3 days when the letter arrived. Harriet Lorne sat by the window of her modest flat in Bloomsbury, her typewriter silent, her tea gone cold. She had been struggling with her latest manuscript for weeks, unable to find a story worth telling, until she opened the cream-colored envelope that bore a crimson wax seal shaped like a raven. Inside was a single sheet, written in an elegant, almost archaic hand. Miss Lorne. You are hereby invited to document the life and legacy of the late Lady Evelina Rothbury, last mistress of Blackmere Vale. The estate awaits your arrival before the month's end. All expenses shall be covered. A. Pembroke, solicitor of Rothbury Estate. Harriet frowned. She had never heard of Lady Evelina or of Blackmere Vale. But something about the tone of the letter, the promise of seclusion, of history buried in stone, pulled at her curiosity. Within a week, she packed her typewriter, 2 wool coats, and her father's old pocket watch, and boarded the early train to Somerset. By the time she reached the small station at Blackmere, the fog was so thick she could barely see the edge of the platform. A carriage waited, its driver silent beneath a dripping hat. Miss Lorne, he asked in a voice as rough as gravel. Yes, she replied, clutching her satchel. He gave a small nod. Best we get moving, then. The mist closes early here. The road wound through narrow lanes flanked by moss-covered trees. Every so often, Harriet caught glimpses of withered cottages and empty fields drowned in fog. Then, as the road climbed, the silhouette of Blackmere Hall emerged, a sprawling manor perched on the edge of a desolate valley. Its windows were dark, its chimneys long cold. When the carriage stopped, the driver remained still. They say the lady still walks these halls, he muttered under his breath. What did you say? Harriet asked. But the man only tipped his hat and drove off into the mist, leaving her alone before the iron gates. With each step up the gravel path, the air seemed heavier, charged with something unseen. And when Harriet reached the grand oak doors, she paused, because from inside the house, faint and distant, she thought she heard the sound of a woman weeping. The doors of Blackmere Hall groaned open with the weight of years, revealing a grand but neglected interior. Dust floated in the thin light that slipped through high windows, and the faint scent of lavender and decay lingered in the air. Miss Lorne, I presume. A thin man stood in the shadows of the entrance hall, his black suit slightly frayed at the cuffs. His voice was quiet but deliberate. I am Arthur Pembroke, the solicitor who sent your letter. Lady Evelina's estate is under my care until the biography is completed. You must be tired from your journey. I am, a little, Harriet admitted, setting down her bag. This place, it feels untouched, as if time forgot it. Pembroke's expression tightened, though only for a second. Blackmere remembers everything, Miss Lorne. Time may pass, but the house never forgets. He led her down a long corridor lined with portraits, solemn faces in oil, their eyes following her every move. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her boots. At the end of the hall stood a towering painting, draped in a thin veil of dust. Harriet stopped before it. Is that Lady Evelina? Pembroke nodded slowly. It was painted in 1892, the year before her husband's death. She never sat for another portrait after that. Harriet lifted the candle closer. The woman in the painting was striking, tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of storm clouds. But what unsettled Harriet was not her beauty. It was her expression, half sorrow, half defiance, as though she were daring the viewer to look away first. She seems alive, Harriet murmured. Pembroke's lips curved into the faintest smile. Many have said the same. Lady Evelina's presence lingers here. The villagers claim she still walks the upper corridors at dusk, weeping for what she lost. Harriet laughed softly, though uneasily. Surely that's just superstition. Perhaps, Pembroke said. Though the house does like to keep its stories close. He showed her to a small room overlooking the vale. The window glass trembled with the wind, and the fields below were drowned in grey mist. "Dinner will be served at 7, he said before leaving. "Please don't wander too far after dark." When the door closed, Harriet unpacked her things, trying to ignore the strange chill that seemed to seep from the walls. She told herself it was only fatigue. But as she set her typewriter on the desk and lit a lamp, a faint reflection caught her eye, the portrait of Lady Evelina, glimmering in the glass of the window. Harriet turned around. The hallway behind her was empty. Yet she could have sworn the eyes in that painting had shifted ever so slightly, now looking straight at her. Harriet awoke sometime in the night to the sound of footsteps. They were faint but steady, moving across the corridor outside her door, slow, deliberate, as if someone in long skirts was gliding past. She sat up, listening. The house was silent except for the whisper of wind against the shutters. Then came another sound, the creak of a floorboard, closer this time. "Mr. Pembroke," she called softly. No answer. Her candle sputtered as she opened the door. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with portraits and old furniture draped in white cloths. Shadows wavered on the walls like restless figures. "Is someone there?" Only the echo of her voice returned. She took a cautious step forward, then another. At the far end of the hall, a door was slightly ajar, and faint light spilled from within. Harriet's heart thudded. She approached, her hand trembling as she pushed the door open. Inside was a small study. Dust coated the books and the writing desk, but the candle burning there was fresh. On the desk lay several letters tied with faded blue ribbon, and a silver locket. Curiosity overcame fear. She untied the ribbon, unfolding the first letter. "To my dearest Arthur," it began in elegant handwriting. "If they discover what we have done, it will ruin us both. Meet me by the bell tower at midnight. We must end this before the house takes notice." Harriet froze. Arthur. Could that mean Arthur Pembroke? She turned the locket in her hand. Inside was a miniature painting, Lady Evelina, unmistakably, and beside her, a man with sharp features and grey eyes. Not her husband, Harriet realized. The air grew colder. Behind her, the floorboard creaked once more. She spun round. In the reflection of the dusty mirror on the wall, she saw movement, the faint outline of a woman standing just behind her, pale and still. Harriet gasped and turned, but the room was empty. Only the candle flickered violently, as though stirred by unseen breath. She snatched up the letters and hurried back to her chamber, bolting the door behind her. For the rest of the night she sat awake, reading the words again and again, until the truth began to form a shape she did not wish to see. Lady Evelina had been in love not with her husband, but with the family solicitor. And that solicitor bore the same name as the man now living in this house. The next morning dawned grey and brittle, the mist pressing against the windows like a living thing. Harriet had barely slept. The letters lay on her desk, their edges damp from her trembling hands. When she went down for breakfast, Arthur Pembroke was already in the dining room, reading the newspaper. He looked calm, too calm, Harriet thought. "Did you rest well?" he asked politely. She forced a smile. "As well as one can in a house this large. It must be lonely here." He folded the paper neatly. "I've grown used to solitude." Lady Evelina did, too. She found comfort in silence, most of the time. There was something in the way he said it that made Harriet shiver. Later that afternoon, she explored the grounds under the guise of research. The garden had long surrendered to weeds, and the stone fountain at its center was cracked and empty. At the edge of the estate, half hidden by overgrown ivy, stood the bell tower, the same one mentioned in the letters. Its door was warped with age, but it yielded with a groan when she pushed. Inside, the air was cold and metallic. A spiral staircase wound upward into darkness. She hesitated, her lamp flickering, then began to climb. Halfway up, she found an old rope frayed at the base of the bell. Beneath it, a faint dark stain marked the stone floor. She crouched, running her fingers across it. It was not dust. It was something that had once been blood. Her breath caught. Suddenly the bell above her swayed with a slow, mournful groan, though no wind stirred. Then she heard it, a woman's voice, whispering so softly she could not tell if it came from the air or from inside her own head. "He promised me he would not let me fall." Harriet froze, gripping the banister. "He promised." The whisper rose to a sob, echoing through the tower. Her lamp flickered violently and went out. In the darkness, she stumbled down the stairs, her pulse thundering in her ears. The heavy door slammed behind her with a force that shook the ground. When she looked back, the bell was still swaying. And for one brief moment, she saw a woman's silhouette standing in the belfry, her head bowed as though in sorrow, before vanishing into the mist. That night, Harriet returned to her room, heart pounding. She unfolded the last of the letters, one she had not yet read. It was shorter than the rest, written in a desperate hand. "Arthur, they know. Meet me at the tower. If I do not come, forgive me. The house wants what we have taken." At the bottom, faint and almost lost to the paper, was a final line. "Do not trust the man who bears your name." That night, the rain fell in torrents, battering against the windows of Graythorne House as if the wind itself was desperate to break in. Amelia sat by the fireplace, her hands trembling around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The letter from Thomas lay open on the table, its ink blurred from her tears. Thomas had written of a discovery beneath the house, a chamber sealed since the 18th century. He had promised to show her the next day. But that day never came. Now, as lightning flashed through the windows, Amelia heard it again, the faint sound beneath the floorboards. Not the scratching of rats or the settling of wood, but something deliberate. A voice. She knelt on the rug, pressing her ear to the floor. The words were muffled, like a whisper carried through soil. "Help me." Her breath caught. She whispered back, trembling, "Who are you?" Silence. Then a long, slow scrape echoed beneath her. The boards shifted slightly, dust falling through the cracks. A cold draft rose from below, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like blood long dried. Amelia's courage broke only for a moment before she reached for the iron poker by the hearth. She struck the edges of the loose plank until it shifted aside, revealing a dark void below. A candle flickered as she leaned closer. The light revealed a narrow staircase carved into the stone beneath. The steps descended into blackness, untouched by time. She hesitated, her mind screaming to stop, to wait until morning. But the same strange pull that had haunted her dreams compelled her onward. She descended, her candle trembling in her hand. At the bottom of the stairs was a small chamber, circular and lined with crumbling bricks. Chains hung from the walls, their iron rusted with age. In the center stood a wooden chest, carved with the same crest she had seen on the letter, a serpent wrapped around a cross. Amelia's hands shook as she brushed off the dust. The lock was broken. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and stained. The first line read, "Property of Catherine Whitlock, 1743. Catherine Whitlock." The name Thomas had written of. The woman who had once lived, and died, in this house. A whisper stirred behind her. "Amelia." She turned sharply, her candle guttering out. Darkness swallowed her whole. And from somewhere behind her, the voice, now clearer, closer, said, "You should not have come here." The candle fell from her hand as something cold brushed her cheek. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the air thick with mist and the garden glistening beneath the pale light of dawn. Amelia sat by the window of Graythorne House, her fingers smudged with the dust of the night before. Before her lay the journal she had found beneath the floor, the journal of Catherine Whitlock. She hesitated before opening it again. The faint scent of mildew and ink rose from its pages, as though time itself had trapped a breath of the past within it. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, a woman's hand, steady but haunted. April 3, 1743. They said the house would bring peace. Yet the walls murmur when the candles burn low. I hear him still, the man they sealed beneath the chapel. His name was Elias, and he will not rest. Amelia's skin prickled. She turned the page. April 12. They warned me not to look for the bell key. But I have seen it in my dreams, buried where the roots drink deepest. The next pages were smeared with something dark. Blood, perhaps. Or ink spilled in panic. Then, suddenly, a pressed flower fell from between the pages, blackened and brittle. A rose. She lifted it gently, and beneath it, in faint ink, were the words. He said the bell would toll for the living and the dead. A sharp knock startled her from her trance. The housekeeper, Mrs. Pembroke, stood in the doorway, her face pale. Miss Harrow, she said quietly, you shouldn't go down there again. Amelia blinked. You knew about the cellar. The older woman's eyes flicked toward the floor, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her apron. We all did. My grandmother worked here when the Whitlocks still owned the land. She told stories of screams in the walls. When the bells rang from the hollow, they said a soul would be taken before dawn. Amelia swallowed hard. The hollow. There are bells there. Mrs. Pembroke nodded slowly. They haven't rung in 200 years. Not since Catherine disappeared. The words struck her like a chill wind. Catherine had vanished, just as Thomas had. That night, Amelia returned to the cellar, clutching the journal and a lantern. The air felt heavier now, as though the house knew her intention. She read the last entry aloud. When the bell tolls, follow the light beneath the floor. Only then will the truth be freed. The earth beneath her feet vibrated faintly, a low hum, like a sound too deep to hear fully. Then came a single, hollow chime. The lantern flickered. A bell, somewhere deep below the house, had just rung. Her heart hammered. She turned towards the staircase. But as she lifted the lantern, she saw it, muddy footprints leading up from the darkness. Someone, or something, had already come out. The following evening, a restless wind swept across Greythorn Hollow, carrying with it the low murmur of something ancient. Amelia had scarcely slept. The journal of Catherine Whitlock lay open before her on the parlour table, the inked words seeming to shift in the flickering candlelight as though the story itself was alive. She could not shake the image of those muddy footprints, too large for a woman, too distinct to belong to anything but a man. Yet Thomas was gone, and no one else had entered the house. At dusk, she made her decision. She would go to the hollow. The path was narrow and overgrown, choked by brambles and nettles. Mist clung to the ground, veiling her boots as she walked. In the distance, half hidden by the trees, rose the silhouette of a ruined bell tower, its stone cracked, its windows hollow eyes staring into the stormy sky. She reached it as the last light faded. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of damp and decay. Ivy crept along the walls like veins of shadow. Hanging from the rafters was a single bell, blackened with age. It was far larger than she'd imagined, large enough, perhaps, to call the dead. Amelia raised her lantern. Carved into the bronze surface were faint words in Latin. She traced them gently with her fingertips, whispering aloud. Cum pulsabit, anima vocata. When it tolls, a soul is summoned. The wind howled through the tower, and for a moment, it sounded like a voice. A woman's voice, faint but unmistakable. Free me. The journal slipped from Amelia's hands. She spun around, her lantern's flame guttering. The voice came again, closer this time. Free me, Amelia. She staggered back as a faint shape began to form within the mist, the outline of a woman in a tattered gown, her face hidden beneath a veil of shadow. "Catherine Whitlock," Amelia whispered. The figure nodded slowly. "He wakes. The bell has rung. You have opened the path." Amelia's voice trembled. "What path? What do you want from me?" The spirit lifted her hand, translucent and trembling, pointing toward the cracked floor of the tower. "Beneath lies his grave. And what I could not." A deep vibration echoed through the ground, the bell above them swaying though no wind touched it. The sound grew louder, heavier, until the air itself seemed to shake. The floor split open. Earth and stone gave way to reveal a staircase spiraling into the darkness below. Catherine's form flickered like smoke. "He waits for you, Amelia. And he knows your name." Amelia's lantern flared, throwing wild shadows against the stone walls. From below, a low, guttural sound rose, not quite a growl, not quite a voice, and yet it spoke her name in the dark. "Amelia." Her blood turned cold. And as she took one trembling step toward the broken stairway, the bell above tolled once more, long and low, and the hollow answered with a whisper that did not belong to the living. Amelia's foot trembled on the first step of the spiraling staircase. The darkness below was absolute, yet from its depths came the sound of breathing, heavy, uneven, alive. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, as if the grave itself exhaled. Catherine's apparition hovered at the edge of the stairwell, her eyes full of sorrow. "Do not fear, Amelia. He is not what he once was, but he remembers." The stairs led to a crypt, carved from cold stone. Torches lined the walls, though no hand had lit them. Shadows danced across the floor, revealing a sarcophagus at the center. Its lid was cracked, as if something had clawed from within. A sudden tremor shook the floor. Amelia stepped back. A deep groan rose from the sarcophagus. The lid shifted. From the darkness emerged a figure, hunched and ragged, yet with eyes that blazed like embers. Thomas. Or what had become of him? He moved toward her without a word, his lips curled into a ghost of a smile. Amelia's heart pounded. "Thomas, is it really you?" His voice was a whisper, echoing through the crypt. "Amelia, you have opened the path. Now, you must finish what was begun." Catherine's spirit glided forward, her form shimmering with urgency. "He cannot pass from this world until the bell is silenced. Only you can strike it down, Amelia." Amelia's gaze shot upward to the bell above. The hollow seemed to tremble with anticipation. She understood. The bell had been the conduit, the call that bound Thomas to the shadow of life and death. With trembling hands, she gripped the rope that had once swung the bell in centuries past. She pulled. The bell swung high, emitting a sound that seemed to pierce the very air, shaking the stone walls around them. Thomas froze, his form wavering like smoke in a gale. Amelia pulled again, then let go. The bell swung back, crashing against the stone, and the hollow echoed with a deafening toll. A blinding light filled the crypt. When her eyes adjusted, Thomas was gone. Catherine smiled, her features soft and peaceful. "It is done. Thank you, Amelia. The hollow sleeps at last." Amelia sank to her knees, exhausted yet relieved. Outside, the mist had lifted, revealing a sky streaked with dawn. The air was clear, the wind gentle. The bell tower still stood, silent and watchful, as if it had always waited for this moment. The secrets of Greythorn Hollow had been revealed, its shadows dispersed, and its restless souls finally at peace. Amelia stepped out into the morning light, carrying with her the memory of the bell, the hollow, and the courage it had taken to face what lurked in the shadows. The hollow was quiet now, but the story of the bell would echo in her heart forever.